listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for Deadly Uncle conversations.
All right, everybody, here we are with the Deadly Uncle Podcast Season 2. I have a wonderful guest. We have a wonderful guest, Rob Gurney, a two-spirited parent from Montreal Lake. I've met this wonderful person in the community here in Edmonton. I've provided sound, and just introduce yourself and where you're from and how you grew up.
So my name is Rob Gurney. I'm from Montreal Lake, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6. So I was born in the Reserve in 1973. And so what I remember, so starting from kind of the beginning, is I was put into impoverishment. There was alcoholism, and I have 4 younger brothers and sisters. A couple of them have some stuff that happened, like FASD. And so my biological mother was 19, and I was taken from her. I actually remember, I don't know if it happened or if it's a dream, that I was on the road, and then a truck came by, and I was like I had run away or walked away, wandered off or something. They picked me up, and then I was in a foster home. I remember living with I called her Vukum. I spoke only Cree at the time. I guess the word is Cookum, but at the time I was a kid, and I thought it was Vukum. And so I was put into foster care, and when they put me into the preschool, I didn't speak any English, and apparently I had a hard time learning English, and it finally came about. My foster parents were pretty nice people. They were Caucasian. It was on a farm. I remember sitting on my foster parents' lap, and we were on the combine, and I just remember that being really, really cool, stuff I like to do. And we also had electric fence for the chickens, but I kept grabbing it. To this day, I love chickens. I don't know. Maybe I was holding a chicken when I touched the fence, but I love chickens. My parent, my dad, now my adopted dad, my dad, who I call my dad, he had saved a bunch of memorabilia, and there was a letter in there from my foster parents because they made a journal. The foster mother made a journal of what was going on with us, because I was in that foster home with my baby brother. He was 3 years younger than me, and his name was James. And so then they came home one day, and I'd come back with James from visiting Christina, is the name of the mother. And I said to them, can I have a new mommy and daddy now? When I first read that, I just started crying. It just hit me. I don't know if I actually remember it, but the feeling was there. And so then I got adopted into a Mormon Caucasian family. It's interesting enough, I've met a lot of people that were adopted to the Mormon family, the Mormon church. And in Saskatchewan at the time, the 60s Scoop, they had advertisements on billboards, radio stations, newspaper, whatever the media there was, to adopt a child, to save a native child, basically was the message. So a lot of us were adopted that way because, after residential school, the 60s Scoop, they just kept grabbing us. Life growing up was not awful. I had everything I needed. I didn't know I was Indigenous. I didn't know it was a thing. I was erased. My language was erased. It was never talked about until I was a little older. But I was a kid. I didn't understand any of that. And so I was Curt, Saskatchewan was where I grew up after I left Prince Albert Farm. And it was a good place to grow up for a kid. It's only about 80,000 people or so. So it was a pretty good place. And I grew up there and made some good friends. And I had a lot of fun with my family. I had 9 brothers and sisters, so I was never without someone to hang out with. But I did like to do things a lot by myself. I remember playing with toys by myself quite a bit and just enjoying that time. To this day, I still enjoy having that time to myself. And then from there, back in that day was spoil the child, spoil the rod, or something about that. And so it was a different time. And parents at the time, they hit their kids. They spanked them. They hit them. And so it was something that was kind of, I wasn't normal, but it was something that was just part of society. I guess it was normal. But sometimes I think my dad went too far. And he give lectures and say some really mean things. And it was too far at times. And I was scared of him. And I don't like being scared of people. I don't want them being scared of me either. And so when after that happened, I ran away to Calgary my mother had left when I was 12. She said she had left. She waited 8 years until we were a little older. And then she left, and so I stayed with her. It was so cool. When I went to Calgary, and all I had on me was a gray shirt, purple corduroy shorts. I remember everything. I was wearing some shoes, and that's about all I had. And so luckily it wasn't too cold out, but I saw a skyscraper, and I'm home. And I've been city person since then. I try to go back to small towns and stuff. It just doesn't feel the same. And so I went back and forth with my mom and dad until I was 15, then stayed in Calgary, because at that point we had moved to McGrath, Alberta. So I moved there when I had run away. My dad had moved to McGrath with the kids and family where he had grown up, where he grew up, and my mom grew up in Raymond. They're two small towns, and that's how they met each other. I think they're second cousins or something. I'm not exactly sure. Um, yeah. And then from there, I was 15, and I ran away to. No, I didn't think I ran away. At this time, I moved to Calgary to live with my mom when I was in grade 10. And something significant happened, which is really part of my life and stuff, is I borrowed her Walkman, her blue Walkman, that still had the cassette. And I eventually told her years later that I had taken it. And all it had was the first Madonna album on it. And I was hooked. I was in love, and I've been a fan since. And I say that because it's really had a significant impact on my life. It's like soundtrack, the person who's there when you're going through certain things. And then at the same time, I was starting to gender bender because I knew I like guys, and I like girls too. But so I was living on this kind of wearing lots of bracelets and just wearing different things. So I moved to Calgary, and then I was 15, and then I started living on my own when I was 16. And so stayed with my mom for a bit, and then got kicked out and started living literally on my own when I was 17. So I was houseless when I was 17. Stayed here and there, and uh, yeah, and then that's when my substance use journey started, and also my drag journey, a few different journeys. So that's kind of takes me up to the adulthood. I think I covered most of it.
Wow, that is quite the journey. That is you know, I can't imagine the journey, the inside journey that you had. It sounds like such a like an interesting time trying to balance, having everything that a family could possibly provide for you that would say that, things are healthy inside the home. And you said that, that was very nice and all, but at the same time, I'm sure that there was always a feeling that there was something missing when it comes to being indigenous and being in these homes. That we're safe and could provide everything, but can you talk a little bit about that feeling of not quite, I guess, belonging?
I didn't quite know what was going on with my parents and why they adopted us. This hadn't something I thought about at that age. I just felt free, and that I was out of the foster care, and that I had a permanent family. And thinking back, it was very much like beat the Indian out of the child. It was very much we had to learn how to be Mormon and to live Mormon, be Mormon, and to have all those really Christian values plus some. It's a Christian organization, but it's really quite a lot of shame and guilt and on your sins, like any religion. But this one goes really, really, really hard. And my dad he still is very much into the church, and I respect that all to him, and he's happy there, and that's his life, and that's what makes him happy. That's great, and I respect that. But as children, I feel that he really pushed it onto us too hard, and he did this through anger and sometimes in violence, and just really wanted us to be good Mormons. I'm not sure if it's really about sometimes race, because he did want to help us and save us, and his intentions were good. The last child in our family was my baby sister, and the government was saying that they weren't going to allow my parents to adopt her because they already had 9 kids. But both my parents really went up and fought because they wanted to keep the family together. There's 5 of us that are all from the same bloodline.
Oh, that's
And so
amazing.
I find that very honorable that they did that to keep us together. So I don't think my dad had ill intentions. I think the way he did it was not a very good way of doing it. It didn't, when you're trying to make someone do something, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Do you think now you said something interesting when you were talking about it that you have met other Indigenous people that were raised in the Mormon Church, and I am by no means an expert on any religion. I just want to throw that out there, but I have heard somebody say that before. The same thing, that the Mormons have adopted a lot of Indigenous people, and one person explained to me, like I said, I don't really know anything about the church or anything, but one person had explained to me that the Mormons have a belief that Indigenous people are like the lost tribe of somewhere. I'm not sure. I don't understand like the whole thing, but that's how he explained it to me. That they really, they like to work with Indigenous people, adopt them or whatever, because they believe in their teachings that the Indigenous people are the lost tribe. I wish I remembered the word.
Of Israel.
But is that something you're aware of?
Yes, and it's Nephites and Lamanites, and we are considered I can't remember exactly how to say it, but Nephites and Lamanites. I think we're the Lamanites. And Nephi's were they have a Book of Mormon, which is their Bible text. So that's kind of where they're coming from. And there was kind of exact details, but I remember my dad telling us about this. So it's neat that you brought that up, because he used to say stuff about that and how we worked together. And it is true, during times colonization, a lot of Mormons did take Indigenous people to help Mormon United States, to help them. And also here in Canada, I believe when the Indigenous came up here, they worked with them. So it was a collaboration.
Yeah, and
even though yeah.
No, I was just saying, it was just interesting to me that you had said that, because it kind of triggered that thought in my mind of what that person had told me before. And I'm glad that you've heard of it. And then now I know that it is actually something that I wasn't, just thinking up. But you also talked about how your dad was, maybe went too far at times in trying to push Mormon values on you and used, violence and stuff like that. But do you think that maybe that's how he was raised too, and that's maybe all he knew, or am I just, I'm just wondering what's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about his childhood, but I do know that he learned it from somewhere. We all learned that from somewhere. And so I would not doubt if he was exposed to that as a child. His mother, my grandmother, was very stern. She was very sweet, but she's also very stern. And I'm sure he got a lot of that from her as well. And maybe my grandpa, I only remember, he passed away when I was 8. I have nothing but wonderful memories of him whistling, and I don't really have anything that I could think of. He was just a very gentle soul. I mean, he did whatever my grandma said, but my grandma was also a really nice person too, so I love them. So I don't want to bash them, but I also want to recognize that they did come from a different time, different era, where it was acceptable to hit your child. There were no laws against it, and I think that's also, yeah, I think why my dad was doing what he was doing, because he really believed it, and that's what he was taught. And he did apologize to us as adults, and he sometimes still apologizes. He said, if I could do anything different, it would have been my anger. And that was really powerful to hear that. And so I of course, accepted his apology. And I apologize for being a little shit one. Oops, being.
Oh, you can swear it's a podcast.
Oh, okay. Yay. So I just remember him apologizing and saying, I'd already forgiven you. It's okay. Let's work on our own relationship. And so I really it was really important to me, even though it wasn't an intergenerational thing because we were adopted, it still was intergenerational. That was still happening, whether it's within, and so that violence, I said to myself, I was not going to keep that going with myself, with my child. And it hasn't. Like, I get my temper, we all do with our kids, but I never wanted to hit him or do anything like that because I just knew that wasn't the way to do it.
Did you, like growing up, what was your experience when it comes to, coming from a religion like being in the Mormon church and, also coming from the two spirited, like I know that brought you into your next part of your story and addiction. So, and also, did you know, like I know a lot of people when they tell their two-spirit story, they say that they knew from quite a young age, and so I just kind of wanted to ask you what was your experience with it.
So I've kind of always known, but I didn't have a name for it or whatever it was, I was 4 years old when I put on my first dress. I remember that being in the basement of my foster parents' place, and it was a long one, and it was a baby doll, and it had red ribbon, and um, it wasn't the most. I remember it being kind of flannel. That's what it was. Yeah, and so. And I remember just dancing around in it and not really just loving it and having fun with it and not really thinking that it was anything wrong with it. I really didn't at that age. I was 4. And then when I did come out to my family, this is funny. I said to them, "Okay, you guys, I just thought you guys would all know that I'm bisexual." And they're going, "We know." I said, "Well, how?" They go, "You're." They all knew. None were shocked. When you were 8 years old, everybody called the dog Max, but you insisted on calling him Muffin. I dug my heels in that. It was Muffin. So that's what I just laughed when I told me that. I said, I remembered that. Really, you guys kind of knew then? Oh yeah, that was yeah. We wondered, we thought about it, but then that was kind of that was the last nail that said it. And but they were all accepting and pretty cool about it. They didn't see anything. They may not agree with it, but they're not rude about it or anything like that. My dad, he's at first he started trying to give me some lectures about it, but then realized I'd set up some boundaries and basically would not talk about it or listen to anything that was saying that the way I'm living is wrong, and disrespectfully having conversations. And so he understands that boundary, and I have the boundary with him too. I don't swear, I don't talk about certain things, and I respect where he's coming from too. So those are good boundaries to have with him, because if not, then there'd be lectures. I know. But that's
My
what dads do sometimes.
I was just gonna say my dad was very good at lectures, so I know exactly what you mean. I wanted to ask you. We were talking. You started to touch on your struggles with addiction. Now, how did that start for you, and was it connected more to you discovering maybe or dealing with the fact that you were two-spirit, or were your addiction problems maybe because of not having that connection to your traditional culture, or was it something totally different? I'm just interested in knowing.
The first time that so again, the first time I realized that I was really different and that the world had prejudice against me was I went to the store to buy some rubbing alcohol for my acne. I was 14, and they said they wouldn't sell it to me because they didn't want me drinking it. And I was shocked. I was like, what? I'd never heard anything like this in my life. I said, what are you? I've never occurred to me. I've never even had a drink in my life until then. And like I started smoking when I was 13, so but drinking I didn't start that till I was 17. And the way that started was there was a time when they didn't ID people when they went into clubs. Yeah, there was a time. And so I started going to this club called Boys Town, and it's a gay club in Calgary. And I was immediately sold on it. I was sexy. I was getting sex. I was getting my drinks paid for. There's a dance floor. There's lights. There's laughing. There's all the things that were on my list of what would be fun or didn't know would be fun, especially the dancing. And to this day, I dance. And so though I started drinking, and then as I started drinking more and more, I started playing around with other drugs. So I started doing marijuana. And then at some point, I got myself into some trouble. I had tried to, I was under the influence and taking a bunch of pills, and I was trying to die by suicide. And what I had done was started a small fire in my living room. Nobody was hurt. I even had a kitten, and I let it free. And I tried other ways of dying that night, and none of it worked. But because it was arson, I ended up doing some time. Um, and that completely messed me up. I am not someone who could do time at that time, and I had completely disassociated, became more trans than anything else to protect myself. Thinking back, and so I was a trans, basically in jail, and again, I was popular, I was safe. I felt okay. Had my heart broken for the first time, and I became obsessive compulsive about that because I didn't know how to deal with it. It was a very dark time for me when I was in jail, and I had done a lot of disassociating to survive it. And then when I got out, I had nowhere to go, and I was still dealing with all these things that had happened up to that point. And so I remember that alcohol helped me not think about it and go dancing. And then I started guys at the bar started saying they would pay me to go with them, and I thought, oh, okay. And then that's when I started getting into that scene and started meeting a lot of the girls. There's a high number of trans Indigenous that were out there, and we took care of each other, hung out with each other. Still to this day, I walk past the block where we used to work and just, wow, it sure looks different. And then I got into cocaine, and I got into injecting cocaine. I was hooked right away. Downtown used to have a bunch of hotels that weren't very nice. They had the York, they had International, all those different hotels that are gone now. And so I would stay there or couch surf. I would stay in the river valley. I'd get an apartment and turn it into a trap house right away, really fast. And I remember being in the river valley and realizing I have an apartment, but I can't live there because I'm scared. So those kind of things. And then I think my lowest point was when there was a puddle of water. It was about 2, 3 in the morning, and I was sitting in that puddle using the water for the injection so I can get high. And I remember people yelling out these hotels that I was talking about and calling me a junkie and saying that's gross. So I remember that. And interesting too enough, when I started working addictions and mental health, I met a few people that had actually done the exact same thing. And so again, I thought it was just me that did something like that. And so it reminded me that I'm not alone in what I do and what happens. And then I got into crack. And so now I was doing about 4 drugs at the same time, and cigarettes. And that was my life for about 8, 9 years. I'd say probably earlier because being in jail, I don't count that as being housed. And so it was about 10 years of my life that and I stopped talking to my family. I completely isolated myself, and no one knew who I was, where I was, or what I was doing. There was no Facebook or any of that. Yeah, so I survived out there for 10 years. And then after that, I became a parent. Sorry, I saw a cat.
No, that's cool.
I don't know who cat it is, but it's in my living room.
So you experienced homelessness. What was the turning point for you when things started to turn around for you? Like you struggled with addiction, you were on the streets for a number of years. What was that first step that maybe led you to that healing journey? Was it the birth of your child?
That you would think it would be. There was a few journeys actually. There's quite a few people that I know of, and you may know of, that have tried to stop using substances for years and years. I tried for about 20 years before I was actually able to stop. It was my 4th residential treatment that I was actually able to stop and stay that way. A couple of times I can honestly say is because I needed somewhere to sleep, I needed somewhere to stay, but the seed was planted. I think that's really important, whether people are motivated to go or not, and they're there, then a seed can be planted. You can go to an NAA meeting under the influence, you might hear something that might plant a seed. And so that's what's happening, and I thought more and more about it and realizing there could be a way. When my son was 6 years old, I went into treatment and was motivated, determined. I knew I needed to make changes because I wasn't happy. And that didn't work out. I thought it happened that the day I got out, I went and drank. I still to this day don't know why. I wasn't ready or some other reason. You could think of a textbook reason, but it just happened. And when my son was 8, I went in, and I'll share the story of how that actually happened. Okay. And it took a long time for me to be able to share this, but I have a good therapist, so I'm able to handle the stuff and be kind to myself and be able to contain it because I have an Indigenous therapist that's very helpful. I could talk a little later about that. But so when my son was 8, he had my nephew who was also 8 and my niece who was 7, and they were sleeping over at my place. And we always had fun parties and stuff. Not parties, but get-togethers, make a fort, hang out. And so I had drank a 26er and a half. So that's where I was at this point. And my nephew had come up to me and said that his mom was hitting him. And in my state where I was, I thought I called the police on her. Well, the police showed up, and what do they see? They see this guy that's completely drunk, and there's no purpose or no reason to be around children at all, right? Like none. He should not be. And so they called the parents. My sister came, picked up her kids, and called me all these horrible names, which at the time was yeah, you're right. I was being a terrible father. And, and then we didn't talk for a couple of years. And then my son's mother picked up my son, and she said in a voice that I can't even explain how she said it. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad, it was very just, she said, get help. And at that moment, I said, I'm stopping, whatever it takes. And so I went straight into addictions counseling. I was already starting to do that, but this one I was taking very serious. I went to a 3 week program, then went to a 6 week residential program in Calgary. And then I got out, I got myself a sponsor, a psychologist, an addictions counselor, went to meetings, talked to people, started medication. Um, I just completely had to stop everything. And what I learned was I could not do it on my own, or not just one thing would help me stop. And that was 11 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. And it was not easiest, but now it's my regular, so I'm not even tempted by alcohol or cocaine and stuff like that.
Yeah. Congratulations, though.
Wow, congratulations.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It's a completely different life. I'm looking at this house going, this is mine. This is where I live. And it's a beautiful house too.
So in your journey, of finding your sobriety, can you tell us about how LaDonna was born? I'm lucky enough to be able to work with the I Am Collective. Big shout out to Lori and all the people that make opportunities for the community. I'm lucky enough to do sound there, and that's kind of where I actually got to know you. I think I met you at a different event that Joanna was a part of through Cease at the time. You were the sound person, and so that I believe was the first time that I met you. But I also provided sound for you in this other situation where you're performing. So can you tell us a little bit about that and your journey?
Do you mean when you became a fan?
Hey, totally.
Yes, that's awesome.
So that journey started, I'd say when I was 4 years old, putting that dress on. And I didn't know there was such thing as a drag queen. I just knew that I liked women's clothes. I liked everything about fashion. My mother was also very much a participant in that. She did all of our colors. I'm a winter. And so she'd give us this little booklet, and it would have all these patterns on it of colors. And we were only allowed to, not allowed, but those are the colors that she said look best on us. So when we were shopping, I would put this thing on the, see what colors work on me. And she's always elegant. I never saw her out of makeup. My son said, "Hey, Blanche Devereaux reminds me of my grandma, except for the sexual part. But the way she's always elegant and presenting and ready to go, and even some of the way she talks is very." And so a lot of my elegance as LaDonna comes from my mom, and I've told her that before too. And she was very honored by that, and just loved hearing that. She was one of my fans, and I loved it. She's been at some of my shows, so it was pretty neat seeing that. And so when I was 17 and I went to Boys Town, I had met drag queens, and I thought, oh, cool. Some of them were so pretty, I didn't know they were drag queens. Um, and then this one came up to me, and I can't remember their name. I really can't remember their name. And they said, "You would look really pretty in drag." I said, "Thank you," without a clue what they're talking about. A compliment to compliment people. And then she, she started talking about my eyebrows and how they could be thinner. And just because I was like, oh, okay, so basically dressing up as a woman. And so that started my journey. I remember being at their place, and we started doing makeup and started getting me dressed and stuff. And then I was finished. I looked in the mirror, and I could not believe what I was seeing. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gorgeous!" And it just to this day I do that. I walk by. Oh, no, I don't do that.
Who is
I'm actually I'm actually very modest.
I
I'm the
do not
most
look at the
modest.
mirror like that.
Yeah, I'm the most modest person I know. And yeah, so then I started doing drag, and I liked it. I started doing it more and more, and then in my time that I was also houseless, I also was believing I was trans, and so I was going to go the whole thing. I was going to do the whole operation. I was going to do the breasts and everything, because I really wasn't sure. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to give myself 5 years, and if in 5 years I still feel this way, then I will go for it. And so 10 years went by, and I was still doing it. I was still doing drag most of the time. When I was houseless, I'd go to the bus, old Greyhound station, get dressed in the washroom. I would go to the hotel rooms. I would just go into a stall and have makeup and just get ready there. I always had use my own hair as longer, so I didn't have to worry about wigs. And then, so it was interesting how my day would start. Just during that time, is I would wake up and not sure where I'd be. I could be anywhere. I could be in the library parking lot downstairs, and I could be in the mall hallway. I could be at a friend's place or somebody I just met overnight. I could be anywhere. A lot of times I woke up and not knowing how I got there. That was pretty scary at times. And so the drag seemed to, for me, I didn't think of it as drag. It was just who I was. I felt that it kept me safe. It kept me dissociated. I come to realize that too. So I was able to do that and be able to deal with things. I was also able to blend in and downtown. So I still can blend in. I can walk downtown and still blend in and not, which is a gift for two-sided sword there. And then, so then in the evening, I just wake up 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I would go work the street. I'd make my money. And then I would get redressed. I'd go to the bar and I would start doing pageants as a drag queen. And so I won a few pageants too and did a lot of work, good work too. And I'm really proud of that work and how I was able to manage all that at the same time without people, or at least I didn't believe they knew that I was houseless. So that was the interesting part of it. So imagine myself being in a ball gown, everything walking down the carpet, and then not knowing where I'm going to sleep that night. So that was kind of my life for about 10 years. Saying it out loud, I was like, wow, that was crazy.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you is like you went through treatment and stuff like that. Did you ever along that way reconnect to your Indigenous culture, and did you ever reconnect to your family back in Montreal Lake after being through foster care, then adopted through the 60 Scoop? Have you made that journey back to your community?
Um, So I didn't know about it being Indigenous until I was actually, and I think a lot of people I've heard this when they were in jail. They were introduced to it. They had a sweat lodge. I'd never been to one before. They had elders. I never knew there was such a thing. I never knew anything about my culture until I was in jail, and I fell in love with it. I thought this feels right. This feels connected. I feel this connection, and that's when I stopped believing in God and I started realizing it's creator. I'm not living a life of sin. I'm just living and trying to do good things, and I'm not a terrible person. And then I didn't know I was two spirited until someone told me that there's different sayings until the 90s, I believe, and then the two spirit thing that came out, and I thought that's who I am. That's how I feel because I am on the fence on so many things. I am bisexual, so I like women and men. I also like trans, female to male, male to female. I have a male personality, not personality, but characteristics that I use when I have to, and then also female when I'm in drag. We're still the same person. There's no longer dissociation, which is part of being sober, brought myself to one person, realizing who I was. And then I'm also politically on the fence. So I'm thinking one thing's okay with one party and not another with the other, and that kind of stuff. I'm pretty liberated about things too. And I try to meet people where they're at and try to just see the world that way as individuals, not just everyone's in the same bucket, or you want to call it. I'm not sure what the word is. Yeah, so that's where I learned about my culture. And then when I retired. I retired from drag when I quit drinking. That's another thing I forgot to mention. When I quit drinking, I had to quit drag because drag and the bar, those were two things that went together. And I had tried for years to stop. I go to the bar and not drink, and I would be bored and just not have fun. And so that brought me back to drinking. So when I quit, I was so determined to quit, so determined and motivated that did whatever it took. And so I quit drag, and then I didn't go to the bar. For 6 years, I did not go to the bar, did not go to the liquor store, nothing. I knew I had to pull the bandit off and just walk away, which was so hard because I had to let go of a lot of friends and just a lot of ways of what I was used to. And then I met a whole bunch of new people, a bunch of other Indigenous people. I started getting to know Indigenous people sober and started learning more about the culture. And then someone invited me to do some two-spirit ceremonies and meeting some two-spirit elders and learning more about that. And that's when I realized that this was what I was missing. I was a little angry at first that it was taken from me, but then also really blessed and felt blessed that it was brought back to me in my lifetime. I was able to have that back. So that's how I. So now I like my medicine wheel. The one thing that's missing is not missing, but needs work on more is spirituality. I tell myself that, but I think I'm just being too hard on myself. I'm thinking I'm not spiritual enough, but that's probably because of my upbringing and how ceremonial it was. Not ceremonial, it's the word. When you're in a religion, there's certain things you have to do and a certain way how you're supposed to do it. And praying all the time, I don't do that. I do walking along. And the what I love about the Indigenous is that I could be walking down the street and see beautiful trees and stuff and know I'm with the creator. I feel that. I can feel I'm with Mother Earth and I put my feet on the grass with no socks on. And I really can feel that and feel the connection when I meet other Indigenous people. Went to the round dance last night, stuck around for a while, and not a long time, but I wanted to be in that energy. I want to be where I felt that energy. And yeah, so ever since all of that, I have been part of the Two Spirit community. I'm actually on the board of the Edmonton Two Spirit Society, and so I really enjoy that. I do a lot of stuff with the Indigenous community, and as a social worker, I work with a lot of Indigenous community members.
The second part of my question was, did you ever reconnect to your family that you were taken away from during the 60s scoop, or was that something that you were never able to bridge back to?
Yes, sorry, I forgot about that one. Um, I found out a few years ago. My brothers and sisters were more looking into it than I was. I was kind of over it. I didn't really, it wasn't something I needed to do. I felt I had to do. So I found out that biological mother Christina had passed away, and so that's how I learned that. And here's an interesting story. Ooh, we're going to spill the tea. So there's this app called Grinder. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's how guys hook up with each other. And so whenever we're on there, when another Indigenous person meets another Indigenous person, you say where you're from because you never know if it's a cousin. And so I did that this one, and this guy told me where he's from. I said, oh, and then I said, mine from there. I was adopted. He goes, what's your biological last name? I said, Roberts. He goes, that's my last name. And then we started talking. I found out that his cookum was my mother. So I'm like, whoa, we're related somehow.
Oh,
I lost
wow.
connection with them. I know it was a bit because I lost connection with that person. Um, yeah, I didn't save his contact information, and so I have not reconnected with them. When I went back to school, I talked with them, like just through the office and stuff, and had a good conversation. It is funny enough that it's on my list of things to do to go visit there and to just get a hold of it and find out what about where am I from? Who am I? Just something like that. In my head, I had this big welcome back party. Just taking over the local gymnasium.
There's banners, there's
Yeah,
a parade.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to wait till there's the community powwow and they'll do the walk around with you there.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I do want to go back there and find out. Just my roots, just curiosity. Yeah, but it's not
That's
something I would.
amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
I had a lot of.
you've been through so much already that you've went through, right? Like you just got to give yourself a little bit of time, I guess, till it's it'll happen for you whenever you want it to, right? Because you've overcome so much. Like your story has been so interesting to me because you've experienced so much, and here you are thriving, and you're able to tell people about the other side of the addiction and of living on the streets. Like that's a huge thing. I worked as a housing outreach worker for about 5 years, and I worked with people that spent like 30 years on the street, and they never felt comfortable even when we found them a place to live, about living in somewhere. So you've just did so much in your life, so much good, and now you're giving back through social work. It's just, I really appreciate your story so far.
Oh, thank you for asking about it because it's interesting going down memory lane. Yeah, neat.
No, it's really it's same thing, like, I've got to know you just a little bit through the community, and I knew that you were one of the people that I wanted to have on as a guest here for season two. Just because, I think it's important to talk about the journey that people take to get to that sobriety, and even not only the sobriety, but just finding our culture, because us as Indigenous people, we're just starting to learn what is our names. And one of the elders I was talking to, he said, if I was to compare it to climbing a mountain, we're not even to the mountain yet. We're still making our way to the mountain, to finding out who we are, and our exact ceremonies, and that it's just amazing.
Yeah, and we're coming close to the end of our time here, so I just want to make sure that I thank you for you sharing your story today and for the time that you've spent with us. And I just wanted to comment on the way you said you were introduced to your culture through jail. We actually interviewed an elder that does ceremony and stuff, and that's how he said he connected to his culture at first, is when he was incarcerated. And then he eventually went back and he was an elder in the jails teaching inmates about culture. So that's really cool that you guys have a similar backstory in a way. But I just want to say that you're definitely a deadly uncle, and I want to thank you for all the time that you've spent with us. And I want to know if Curt has any more questions for you before we wrap this all up.
And so, yeah, just one more question. I just want to, where can we expect to see LaDonna next?
Um, let's see. Do you guys have OnlyFans? No, just
I'm not saying that on air.
well, I know Curtis does, but hey. No, you can catch me if you want to see, if you go to Instagram at LaDonna Cree, so at LaDonna Cree, then I put where my shows are on there, and so you'll always be able to see what it's on. And it's private, but I will accept any of those. And yeah, if we know each other out there, we haven't seen each other for a long time, please add me on Facebook as Rob Gurney. I only add people I actually know, just for safety. That's just for my privacy too. So yeah.
You're listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for Deadly Uncle conversations.
Coming up on the Deadly Uncle Podcast.
And because of my father's history with the residential school, of course, I wasn't taught growing up culture. I wasn't taught language. So when I saw an opportunity, an opening at the Friendship Center, to be honest, I didn't think I'd get it, but I applied anyway. And I went through a couple of different interviews, and I guess they liked what they heard. And so that was my introduction, I guess, into culture within the community inside the city, right?